Here's me looking away from the screen, not looking at the camera, as if somebody had sent me live without me being aware of it while I'm entering my placeholder lineups into my phone off screen. There we go. All right. Welcome to the show, everybody. Roto Scouts baseball fans, what's going on a Sunday morning? 11:45 start. We're going to be a little bit pressed for time today. We've got 10 games to talk about. I appreciate everybody jumping into the chat. Stephen B in the chat greatly appreciates me. I really appreciate the kind words there, Stephen. Really nice to start the show off with something like that. Very right back at you, buddy, and appreciate you hanging out with us today. But thank you so much, guys, for hanging out, for helping support me getting this thing off the ground, for coming back, regardless of how picks go. We've had some good ones, we've had some misses, but I love seeing everybody coming back, seeing all the activity in the chat. The thumbs up help a little bit. The subscriptions to the channel help you guys know when I go live. As you can see, it's always a little bit variable, but I don't want to waste a ton of time up top here. I kind of want to dive right in because we've got a 1:35 start. I started the show a little bit late because I knew I'd need a little bit more time. It's amazing how clicking the snooze button a couple times, like twice, adds up to it should be 5-10 minutes, and it adds up somehow to like a hour long delay in your day. But that's what I did today, so we're a little bit behind schedule. So let's just jump into this thing, right? First game on deck, and let's do the overview part first, right? I think there's a really interesting slate ahead. There are a couple really, really good-looking spots for power upside. It's a couple of the obvious teams, but I think there's some really killer spots for bats. And then there's like a few really high-end pitchers with a concentrated, that'll probably have some concentrated ownership. They're the obvious names at the top of the board. And then there's kind of just a broad range of like viable mid-price, mid-range type guys for your SP2 pool on DK. So I think we're somewhat straightforward on the pitching side of things, and with some obvious good spots for bats, and then for some potentially sneaky low-owned spots for bats. So we'll get through it. I know that's kind of could be said about any DFS slate. Joker just walked into the room. He's joining us under the desk here. But let's jump into this one. Taj Bradley taking on the Red Sox at Fenway Park. Bradley, 8,800, 10-2 on the FanDuel slate. Obviously a different play across sites. I'm assuming the FanDuel price keeps his ownership number down a little bit going up against the Red Sox, frisky enough team, in a home game for Boston. I assume that keeps his ownership low. And as you can see, he projects fairly well for me. 34.4% strikeout rate for the kid, 4.1% walks. He's been outstanding over 6 starts, 30 innings, or mostly outstanding anyway. 5.4% barrel rate, 3.28% hard home run rate, 39.2% hard hits. There's a little bit of hard hits there. There's a little bit of average exit velo. Steve Leibowitz says still bad hitting weather in Boston. So yeah, that'll play well into Bradley's favor as well. I actually haven't had a chance to look at weather at all. So bear in mind, if I talk about something that's got like a lot of rain or some weird tornado hovering over the stadium or something like that, let me know in the chat, guys. I did not get a chance to do a deep dive on weather today. But yeah, in a what should be probably, I assume, a cool day in Boston. It's 65 degrees here in the New York area. So I assume a cool day, bad hitting weather in Boston should be a little bit of a boost to Bradley. I think he's playable. I think he'll be more popular at the DK price, 8,800. That's a very good price for a pitcher with a 35% strikeout rate. So I assume he'll be a little bit more pricey there, but probably less popular overall, right, than some of these other starters. So there's a good opportunity there. He could certainly get dinged by this Red Sox team. No doubt about it. They're good enough to get to him here. Alex Verdugo, Rafael Devers, Justin Turner, Masataka Yoshida up at the top. But the back end of this lineup is pretty weak. Jarren Duran has cooled off pretty badly. He's sitting 279, 333, 442 now after that red hot start. Tristan Casas, we know, has been bad all season long outside of a little bit of power upside. The contact profile is nice, which is what I keep going back to with this kid. 12.4% barrels is good, but only 6 home runs below the Mendoza line overall, 85 WRC plus. Enrique Hernandez has been bad. He's a utility guy, good in the field still, plays a bunch of positions. Like, he's a valuable piece for them for real life baseball, but only an 82 WRC plus out of the veteran utility guy. Just not a lot there for Hernandez so far this year. I like Connor Wong as their catcher. I like it better when he's catching for them. So a little bump to the catcher position for the Red Sox here. 10.7% barrels for Wong, 6 home runs and only 131 plate appearances. Pretty good. Similar like what Higashioka does, although his home runs are going over the wall a little bit more frequently. But just in like terms of a cheap, fairly low-owned catcher who's got a good contact profile, I think Wong fits that bill as well. On the other side of this one, you can see the Rays home run marks are checked somewhat by Tanner Houck. Not necessarily as much this year, but over time, like mostly last year, he was very good at keeping the ball in the yard, limiting home run upside. I think it was one and change percent home run rate over the last 2 seasons. It's a hybrid role, mostly out of the pen last year. He was really effective in that. He's been decent in the starting rotation. A 5.30 ERA is masking his 3.69 xFIP, which is very good. 22.5% strikeouts is fine. He's given up a little bit more power, 3.15% home runs, 40.9% hard hits, a little bit more barrel rate, a little bit more launch angle. So it's a question mark about whether he's going to sustain the ability to check power. And so far this year, it's come up a little bit. But I think, and Stephen Leibowitz points out no Wander Franco in that Rays lineup. I'm just seeing these confirmed lineups for the first time too, so we'll try and go through those. But that's a great call out. Obviously one of their star players out of the lineup. A little bit of a boost to Houck, but you can see he doesn't project that well. What I think we get from Houck here is more, maybe he checks the Rays a little bit, keeps them to 4 or 5 runs, and they don't explode for value. So we're seeing that through the projections. Yandy Diaz, Brandon Lau, Randy Arozarena, Josh Lowe, Isaac Paredes, Luke Raley, Jose Siri, Taylor Walls, Christian Bethancourt. You can play that Rays lineup from top to bottom. They could certainly create runs against Houck. It's certainly not impossible to hit a home run against him by any means. And if anybody's going to do it, it's this loaded team that's just been hitting the ball like crazy all year long. So I think you can go to Rays here, but I would temper my expectations and I would have them in lower shares than normal. I don't know what the ownership's going to look like around the industry. If they're very, very low owned, I think maybe you can take out a few additional shares just on the idea of how good they've been, how much flexibility. Just look at especially on FanDuel, look at all the multi-position eligible guys in that lineup. And they come at pretty cheap prices for guys who have been this effective this season. Sneaky guys in the back end of the lineup, like Isaac Paredes for $3,700 on DK, $32 on FanDuel. Jose Siri still at $32, $34 in the outfield. Walls has been playing out of his mind. I don't think he's nearly as good. The triple slash has come down, but the power's been great this year. He's been creating runs. $4,200, $3,300 with multi-position for him is viable. And then Bethancourt, I talk about a decent amount of the time. Sturdy little 13.2% barrel rate, 48.4% hard hits from a cheap catcher who doesn't get enough attention when people go to the Rays. So I think you can go there. So for me, this one's primarily like Bradley and then maybe some Rays, maybe a few Red Sox bats, but I don't really love it. I think there's some upside there. Probably not going to Houck. I wouldn't begrudge anybody Houck shares at the cheap prices. I think he could get you a serviceable SP2 start at that 6,800, but it's not great. There's probably not enough reason to have to go there on a big slate. Phillies confirmed lineup. We see the Kyle Schwarber leadoff man again here. Bryson Stott hitting 5th. Castellanos, Harper, Turner, JT Realmuto. So pretty good version of this Phillies lineup going up against Trevor Williams here. I think we can definitely go to Phillies here. Decent amount of power on the left side of the plate from Schwarber and Harper. Nick Castellanos is having a very good season. Had a great game on, Friday night. He put up that monster performance. Trey Turner obviously struggling, but that's why he only cost $5,300, $3,100. The FanDuel price is particularly cheap. We know Trey Turner's a better player than that. I will ride that to the very bottom of the sea. He could cost the dead minimum, and I'll be putting him in my lineup. Actually, that would be really appealing. I wish they would do that. JT Realmuto, star caliber catcher. I think you can basically go top to bottom with this Phillies lineup. At the very least, like 1 through 8. You're getting good power from the left side from Brandon Marsh and Cody Clemens for cheap prices there. I like this Phillies team. I expect them to kind of catch fire over the next chunk of the next month or two and really take off here, and this could be a very good start for them to do that, going up against Trevor Williams. 16.9% strikeout rate, a 3.93 ERA, masking a 5.02 xFIP, so more than a full run worse in the expected FIP number. 12.9% barrels, 4.24% home runs. I think there's plenty of upside for the Phillies here against Williams. I don't need any shares of Trevor Williams in my lineups here. I don't really see it much of a path to success there, even at the discount prices. Just seems really, really thin. Ranger Suarez on the other side, kind of interesting. The Nats we've talked about much better against left-handed pitching in general, but they're still a fairly low-end lineup. They still don't hit for a lot of power, and Suarez is capable enough. I don't really buy it. He's sitting at a 7.13 ERA for this season, but his xFIP is half that, 3.55 xFIP, and this is in 17 2/3, 4 starts, so it's not a large sample by any means. 21% strikeouts in that tiny sample. I buy the xFIP is certainly more realistic than that ugly ERA. And if we're looking last season, 19.5% strikeouts in 155 and a third, 3.65 ERA, 3.82 xFIP. Was good at checking power, 5.1 degree average launch angle, 6.8% barrels, 2.27% home runs. Did the same thing in terms of the power allowed the year before, 0.96% home runs in 12 starts, 106 innings, partly out of the bullpen, slightly higher strikeout rate because of those bullpen innings, but very good limiting barrels, limiting launch angle, limiting hard hits, and power. So if we're hunting around for a value guy, I kind of like the idea of Ranger Suarez. You can see it actually just carries through in my model here. He projects pretty well. Now, that's on the back of a lot of innings. My model's giving him a big innings total in this one. So I kind of question his ability to get there, but 6,700, 5,700, especially on DK for a hitter price, I think you can go to shares of Ranger Suarez against this Nationals lineup. I think if you do that, and if you do that aggressively, it's probably not something you want to do aggressively. Let's start there. But if you do go to that, I think taking out some hedge stacks of Nationals, particularly with the righty hitters, is probably a good idea in some other lineups. Don't get too carried away with it, but they are frisky against lefties. Lane Thomas, Joey Meneses, Stone Garrett, some Luis Garcia, who I forgot to change his position again, which is every day. Gunn tweeted about that today. It was funny, saying, why do I have to change Luis Garcia every day, but I can't get two Shohei Ohtanis, which I totally agree with him on. But the righties here are interesting. The guys I named there, plus maybe some Riley Adams, Alex Call down the bottom. No Keibert Ruiz in the catcher spot. But it's not a great lineup here. Certainly, struggles to hit for power against both hands. Eimer Candelario has struggled badly against left-handed pitching for his entire career. He's a switch hitter, but he definitely is better on the other side of splits. So I don't worry too much about him and don't really need him if I'm going to Nationals bats. So for me, this one's Phillies bats, some Ranger Suarez value, and then some hedge stacks of Nationals. If you're not playing Ranger Suarez in your 150 lineups, I don't think you need to go to Nationals. And they're not really the most appealing team to go to, even from like a contrarian low-owned, I assume they're going to be low-owned here, or value-based sense. It's just not a great spot. They weren't projecting for like a massive run total or anything like that. So I think there's some upside there. Yeah, 4.10 implied total the last I checked. So I think that's there's some upside there for Ranger Suarez. Let's move on. The Toronto Blue Jays against the New York Mets in Queens. The Blue Jays 4.10 implied team total against Kodai Senga. The Mets carrying a 4.49 implied team total against Yusei Kikuchi. I like the Mets side of this equation a lot better than I like the Blue Jays side of this equation. I think Senga is a pretty good pitcher overall. 29.8% strikeout rate. Has an issue with walks, 13.2% walk rate, but a 3.44 ERA, a 3.80 xFIP, and can dominate when he comes out with his true stuff and on form. So we need to see the good version of Senga, obviously. In his last start, he went, last start was 7 scoreless, 9 strikeouts, while 1 hitting the Phillies. So if you're thinking Phillies, Blue Jays, that's a relatively equivalent high-end team. I think he's got upside here. Of course, he was kind of lousy in the start before that. He walked 5, struck out 6, allowed 3 earned runs in 5 innings to the Cubs in that start. This is all directly out of the article, by the way, which is up on the site. The good thing in that Phillies start, while he struck out 9, he also walked nobody, which is key for him, right? A 13.2% walk rate. If he can cut that down, there's major upside in Senga. So he projects as one of my highest end pitchers for the day going up against the Blue Jays here. I would probably grab a few hedge stacks of Blue Jays, similar kind of idea. George Springer, Bo Bichette, Vladdy Guerrero all strike out at or about 15-16%. So that's a really tough start to this lineup for any pitcher. They don't walk a ton. 8.5, 8.1, and 4.9%. That's not crazy walk rates. You get better walk rates on Chapman in the heart of the order belt in a small sample here. So maybe he doesn't strike those guys out. Maybe he just gets a couple lineouts and we get away with that, and then he finds some strikeouts through like this part of the batting order. I kind of like the upside for Senga here. I kind of like the idea of throwing Mets bats at Yusei Kikuchi. He's got a little bit of strikeout upside from years past, but this year 21.5% strikeout rate in 11 starts, 56 and a third. Last year 27.3% was a lot better. Year before 24.5% in larger samples. But every year he's just lousy for power. Right? Last year, 5.07% home run rate, 91.6 miles an hour average exit velo, 14.8% barrels. Year before, 11% barrels, 47% hard hits, 92 miles an hour average exit velo, 4.05% home run rate. This year, the home run rate's the highest it's been, 6.20 in the small sample, 48.2 48.2% hard hits, 92 miles an hour average exit velo. So all of this is getting worse as time goes on. I think there's plenty of upside for power. And whoops, that's not the right thing to hit there. Bring that back to a visible size. Was I at 100? I think it was. Okay, hopefully you guys can still see that. I'll check in a half a second. So what I'm saying here is I think there's plenty of upside to throw Mets power bats, particularly, Pete Alonso, obviously a monster power hitter in the heart of that order. But you can see decent little power mark on Eduardo Escobar. We don't get Brett Beatty. We don't get... we do get Mark Vientos. He's hitting 8th. So... is Escobar the ideal 5 hitter here? No. But he's very cheap, 3,400, 2,600, multi-position eligible, and he's been good in seasons past. He's just kind of on the back end of the career, but a switch hitter and hitting 5th there. Starling Marte's also kind of struggled this year, but the hit tools come on a little bit. Certainly a little bit of mid-range power and definitely still speed there. I like Jeff McNeil better when he's hitting 7th than when he's hitting 3rd. I don't know that the trade-off for Tommy Pham and Mark Canha instead of Nimmo up at the top of the lineup is worth that. Definitely a downgrade to the first 2 spots there, but those are 2 capable enough veterans at these super cheap prices, 27, 29, 25, 29 in the outfield, that you can use one or the other. Pham can hit for a little bit of power, steal a base, so can Canha. They're very much the same guy. You'd rather have one or the other, probably not both. Lindor, a struggling star, very cheap because of those struggles. Certainly still tons of power there. And then the back end of the lineup, you get Francisco Alvarez. I was hoping he'd hit 3rd today like he was projected to. Still love him in the 9 spot there. Cheap catcher, probably get less ownership. And, a little dip in the power number. He was at 8 something in my home run model, drops to 6.20 on the idea of like a, 1 and change fewer plate appearances and how the model works. But Vientos and Alvarez down there, certainly 2 interesting power bats, 2 interesting high-end young prospects at cheap prices, probably fairly low ownership for the Mets down there. With all the contact that Kikuchi gives up, either one of those guys could hit you a sneaky home run today. So I kind of like that. I don't need shares of Kikuchi. Could he come out and strike out 6-7 Mets, have a decent game, pitch cleanly through 6-7 innings, book you a win? Sure. Is it for me? No. I tend to attack his power upside at the plate more than I use him on the mound, unless it's like a really short slate or something. So I think that's how I'm looking at this one. So for me, it's probably 3 corners, Kodai Senga, Kodai Senga, the Mets, and then some Blue Jays hedge stacks. High scoring potential in this one. Let me see if we got the Brewers lineup in the last few minutes. Doesn't look like we have. Oh, I wanted to check the video, make sure you guys can still see that. Yeah, all right. I accidentally shrank everything. Mets lineup's interesting in 1-2 spot against Kikuchi. Not a Pham fan, though, against the lefty. Yeah, I agree totally there, Stephen Leibowitz, like I was saying. It's, you're getting 2, like, clunky-ish kind of veterans, capable guys, counting stats, et cetera, but, sounds scary to say, but Lively and Singer look like they're viable SP2s with the Milwaukee and Colorado lineup. Yeah, I think I like the Singer against Colorado lineup spot better, despite how bad Singer has been. I don't fully trust Lively. Very nice 27.3% strikeout rate to start the year for Lively. It's just the hitting environment in the Cincinnati game to me is the more appealing for bats one, and the one where I'm less inclined to roster a pitcher. So for me, both of these guys are kind of off the board. I do like if you wanted to go to Lively for 7,500 on the DK slate, I would not tell you you're making a mistake. There's definite strikeout upside, 8 strikeouts in each of his last 2 starts, 27.3% strikeout rate over 22 2/3 innings in 3 starts, a couple appearances out of the pen. There's certainly upside at the DK price. The $9,000 FanDuel price, I don't want any part of in this park. The Brewers are frisky enough. You get the Turan Caratini, Joey Weimer version, so not that oddball lineup that worked out yesterday with Blake Perkins having a monster day. How about Blake Perkins, who got a short mention here as a former second-round pick, as somebody with potential at the min price, having a monster day. He was in 4 or 5 of my lineups that were competitive early and then died on the vine. Had a bunch of chasers yesterday, but didn't get over the top on FanDuel. Hopefully somebody had that play pay off, or something else that we talked about pay off yesterday. But I think I'm going right back to Brewers bats. We'll see what's in the confirmed version of the lineup. Somebody just said it just dropped. I don't have it just yet. Shmanishy Shmab's sometimes behind the curve on those. So we'll see what's in there. I'm assuming Christian Yelich is going to be in there. I'm assuming Rowdy Tellez is going to be in there. William Contreras probably gets in there. Brian Anderson, Abraham Toro would both be interesting. Multi-position eligible, cheap prices. Toro especially. I definitely like it. 2,500, 3,300 across sites, second base and third base. Frisky little bat, a little bit of power, a little bit of speed. Guy that I definitely want to keep my eye on, cheap prices. Turan, Caratini, Weimer, you mix and match those those guys. It's really about like 1 through 6 when I'm going to the Brewers here, but I think they're playable up and down against Lively. Like I said, a couple shares at the DK price for Lively if you want them. Hauser for me is a non-play. 15.5% strikeouts in five starts, 24 and a third. A little bit better in years past for strikeouts, but not actually, no, worse last year, 15.2%, 17.5% year before, saves what I just said there. But just not a premium strikeout pitcher. Can find you clean innings, but he's more of an innings-eating guy. In this type of environment, that's just not the guy you want to go to. Even with the Reds' general lousiness and kind of a low-end home run projection based on his ability to sap power a little bit, I just don't want him. I think they can sequence enough against him, score a few runs, and he's got such low strikeout upside that I don't need to go there. At the same time, the Reds, kind of a low-end stack. The idea of park-based potential is certainly there. Like I said, there's a healthy enough run total. Actually, man, 5.11. It's a little higher than I was remembering. So maybe I'm more interested in the Reds than I was thinking. I assume they'll be fairly popular with that run total and their cheap prices. So I was more interested in them yesterday when I was showing more power potential. But they obviously, delivered some significant run creation yesterday and some power from Jake Fraley had a nice day. McLean had a nice day. Didn't get the homer that I was calling, but I would go right back to those two lefty, to the one lefty Fraley and then to Matt McLean for a cheap price. And then you can work in like Kevin Newman, Jonathan India, Spencer Steer from the right side of the plate. Stevenson hasn't been great, but he's a cheap catcher where you need them. 41.9% hard hits, 8.8% barrel rate is certainly effective enough at 4,000 where you need catchers. Only 2 home runs, only a .095 ISO, 20% worse than average creating runs. It's not been great for Stevenson. Nick Senzel, Will Benson, TJ Hopkins, whoever the hell that is, round out the lineup. Hopkins doesn't look like he's on either site, so I wouldn't worry about him. So it looks like an 8-man DFS lineup for the Reds today. They're not great. But again, park-based expectation, matchup-based expectation. For DFS purposes, I think we could definitely go to some Cincinnati Reds here. And there's a healthy run total on both sides. So for me, this one's neither pitcher and bats on both sides. If you do have to roster one of these pitchers, it's definitely Ben Lively over Adrian Hauser. Two confirmed lineups in this one. The way I wrote this up in the article was I could have saved time in years past by just saying play the hell out of Sandy Alcantara against the Athletics. This year, he's my highest projected pitcher. He only cost $9,700, $9,000 on DraftKings for this pitcher against this team is a massive discount. But he's kind of earned that discount with what he's done this year. 4.93 ERA, a 4.45 xFIP, a 1.25 WHIP, a 8.5% walk rate, only 20.5% strikeouts. 69 and a third in 11 starts. He still pitches deep into games, whether he's going bad or pitching well. 12.9% swinging strike rate is still very good, but it's down a little bit. 26.8% CSW is down a little bit. The stuff is still electric. Sandy Alcantara is still dynamite. So maybe it's just some happenstance in here, but I'm concerned about the dip in strikeouts. You need him to pitch those, complete game type of outings. I think there's enough upside that I'm going to trust my projection here and just roll with Sandy Alcantara as much as he comes up. Well, that's probably not true because he would probably come up at that price just like 150 times in 150 lineups. So I think I'll temper that a little bit, but I think I want to get pretty aggressive with Sandy Alcantara here. I assume the industry is going to do the same thing. I can't imagine that everybody's shied away from him just yet in a matchup against the Athletics. If you wanted to hedge with a couple athletic stacks, that's not really a spot for me. I don't think I'm going to do it at all. I just believe too much in Sandy Alcantara's talents, and even bad pitchers have held this lineup down this year, found big strikeout totals against this lineup. So I think I'm rostering him. I don't think I'm rostering much A's. If you are going there, you're going to Esteury Ruiz with all his speed, a little bit of on-base acumen and correlated scoring ability. Put him together with Ryan Noda, maybe some Ramon Laureano, JJ Bleday. I don't need any Brent Rooker, really. He's awful May, still has the same 11 home runs that he had on May 12th, was below the Mendoza line for May. Everything is normalizing. It's still not as low as it's going to get for Brent Rooker in terms of the triple slash. The ISO is still high. The WRC plus is still great because of that outstanding March and April, but it's bad. Elemis Diaz, Jace Peterson, Shea Langoliers. I like Langoliers as a productive catcher. I actually wish he would hit higher in the batting order. 2,600, that would be, if he was hitting, say, 5th, where they've got Brent Rooker, that would be an interesting spot for a catcher. He's got 7 home runs on the year, a 169 ISO, 9.9% barrel rate, 38.8% hard hits. It's not like it's pretty, but I think he's a productive catcher, and I'd rather have that opportunity from a catcher than just another outfielder, right? And everybody who goes to the A's, I think, will go to Brent Rooker still in that spot. So I would just rather get Langoliers there. But it's not pretty on the A's. I don't need it. The Marlins side of this one, No Jorge Soler, major downgrade for this team. I do like Luis Arias, Brian De La Cruz, Jesus Sanchez, maybe some Garrett Cooper, maybe some Julie Gurriel. Like it really falls off without Jorge Soler in there. But you're going up against Paul Blackburn, 7,100, 7,800. It's his second start of the year. I think you can throw bats at him, but without Soler, it definitely takes the gleam off of that play a little bit. Blackburn last year, 111 and a third, 19.1% strikeouts, was okay. League average-ish type of a pitcher. Could he go out there and shut down a Marlins team that's against right-handed pitching is not overly productive, especially without Soler's power? Yeah, I think he could. I think there's enough upside to go to that top four, maybe some Yuli Gurriel, maybe some of like Joey Wendell or Jonathan Davis for cheap down at the bottom of the lineup. But I'm going to temper my my upside on Marlins stacks. I'm not going to get carried away with that. Araya is obviously one of the best hit tools in baseball. 390. He's going to push 400 for the season. He'll probably drop into like the 370s when it's all said and done. But he was there about 2 weeks ago and he's pushed it back up to 390. So one to watch. Him and Esteury Ruiz's two chases for 100 stolen bases and a 400 batting average. A lot of fun baseball history in play this season. So De La Cruz, good stick. Jesus Sanchez, decent little pop from the left side of the plate. Only 3,200, 2,900 for Sanchez. He's their most interesting hitter today, I think, at those prices. 4 home runs in 92 plate appearances earlier in the year, 12.3% barrel rate, 50% hard hits. That's good enough. But yeah, low end game on all sides here. Excuse me. High end opportunity for Sandy Alcantara. Low end game at the plate. Low end game for Blackburn. That Brewers lineup, let's see what's in it. Yelich, Miller, Tellez, Singleton hitting cleanup. That's interesting. Min price John Singleton on the FanDuel slate. Let me see where he drops on. Let me drop that in. That's interesting enough to go back to real quick. Singleton, I mentioned him the other day when he came up, if you remember. 31, I think now. Former like prospect of the year based on his power in a couple different publications years and years ago, like mid-20 teens. Hit over 20 home runs, multiple seasons in the minors, was a big part of the Astros plans for a little while. Came up and has kind of always scuffled at the major league level. I think 14 total home runs in like 450-ish plate appearances, something like that over time. But it's not been great for John Singleton, but he's at the dead minimum cleaning up for this team today. You can see his numbers are just like absent. That's why we're not even seeing a number here. But so we're all right. This Brewers lineup is interesting now. All right, so we're getting Blake Perkins, 2,100 dead minimum on, and the dead minimum on FanDuel. He's hitting 6th. We're getting John Singleton at the dead minimum on both sites, hitting cleanup. Both of those spots are interesting enough to me that I'm going to push a few shares of those guys. I'm going to make sure that I'm getting to those guys. I was already looking to go to Brewers stacks here, but adding that value in the middle is going to help you combine this team with whatever pitching and whatever other stacks that you want. These guys were already fairly inexpensive for their talent. Rowdy Tellez, Christian Yelich, obviously, ton of upside, ton of power there. Brewers are super duper interesting, especially the Singleton and Blake Perkins plays, and Monasterio effective enough in the shortstop position for a cheap price as well in his rookie year. So bump to the Brewers' expectations just based on how they'll pull lineups together with those guys at price. Now, those guys are, Singleton is not a major leaguer for a reason, right? He's in that Brent Rooker camp. A guy with plenty of power, but certainly unreliable. It's about the price and the lineup position there. So nobody's going out and saying that John Singleton is now a superstar and to go roster him. But, no, I am saying go roster him. I'm not saying he's a superstar. Similar story for Perkins. I think Perkins is a little bit more of a realistic guy, getting his first action finally in the show. Like I said yesterday, second round pick years ago, time in the Yankee system, time in a couple other systems. I think was he a Royals pick initially? I forget who initially took him, but regardless, Perkins, a little bit more reality, and he's a little bit younger. I think he's just about to turn 27. Anyway, Tristan McKenzie making his season debut. Limited innings in his rehab starts. The last one was capped by rain, so he only got 40-some-odd pitches in there. I expect 70 to 75 pitches, which at 8,100, 9,400, I think is too limiting, even with the strikeout upside against this Twins team. A couple darts maybe on DK, but it's really, really thin. First start of the year,
semi-unpredictable pitcher at times. He was very good through last season, 5.9% walk rate, but that was down from 11.7% the season before. Now, it was a season in which he kind of, really hit his stride as a major league pitcher, figured things out, et cetera, et cetera. So I believe in the 5.9% walk rate, but in his first start back after not a ton of rehab opportunity, like, could those hiccups come back? Could we get that ugly version today in this first start? Yeah, I think there's enough viability to that idea as a narrative, and there's just a lack of desire to pitch Tristan McKenzie with a limited pitch count that I think we can get away with, skipping him there, maybe throw some Twins bats against him. I don't love the spot for Twins bats. They do swing and miss plenty, so he could punch holes in this lineup even if he's having an off day. 4 or 5 runs could be a realistic total and DFS relevant scores. There's enough bats in this lineup, but now that I'm looking at the confirmed version, no Buxton, no Correa. You do get Max Kepler in there. You do get Jorge Polanco in there. Royce Lewis's price is way up now, $3,600, $3,400. Still cheap on DK, but certainly not the min price anymore. Donovan Solano's at the min price hitting cleanup, $2,500 on FanDuel. It's not a great version of the Twins lineup. So maybe that's a bump to the idea of a little bit of appeal for Tristan McKenzie. If he gives you 5, could he get there on DK if he's punching out a lot of these hitters? I guess he could, but it's really thin. I would only do it a few times and only on DK. I don't think you get there at the FanDuel price and with very low expectation of a quality start. But at the same time, I think this version of the Twins lineup kind of tempers my desire to get to any of their stacks. I'll have a few, probably some of these guys with some of the home run potential. The back end's kind of weak. Any one of these guys in the back end could bend a slate on any given day. We've seen Michael A. Taylor do that 7 times already this season. So in one-off type shares, minor share, not one-off, but mix and match type shares, I think you can throw some of those guys in if you're building a lot of twin stacks, but I don't think I'm going to be building a lot of twin stacks. Joe Ryan, definitely want to be a part of. Expensive, but well worth it. 29.1% strikeout rate, 5% walks, 3.43 xFIP, 2.77 ERA. Just been dominant for the most part through this season, going up against a really bad Guardians lineup that's just dramatically underperformed. We've talked about only Jose Ramirez, above average for run creation this season. He's now just barely clinging to that. 104 WRC plus over 243 plate appearances. Everybody else has been below average. They're not hitting for power. They're not getting on base enough. They're running a little bit when they get on. Straw's got 10, Kwan's got 10 in the stolen base department, but both of those guys should be getting on more often and running a little bit more often and certainly providing more correlated scoring when we're talking about Kwan. So it's not been good. I'm not going to go to the Guardians very much at all here, if at all, going up against Joe Ryan, who I do want a big part of. The one thing they do well, which is important to call out when we're rostering starting pitching against them, is avoid strikeouts, particularly against righties. So there is the idea of maybe we can cap the expectation for strikeouts for Joe Ryan, but I just think he pitches a clean game here, gives us 6-7 good innings, chases the quality start, probably chases a win bonus even with the weaker lineup here. They were favored in this game, and I just think he's got a really good opportunity for a nice start here. So he's one of my top pitchers on the day. So for me, it's probably just Joe Ryan here as far as super appealing pieces. It's kind of like the Alcantara spot. I want the pitcher, and I don't really need shares of the bats on the other side. I'll take some shares of Twins bats, particularly for some of these prices. Some of this multi-position eligibility has appeal, if you're playing on DK especially. But I don't love it, and I don't need the Guardians. I don't think I want Tristan McKenzie with what I expect to be a limited pitch count. If anybody saw otherwise for pitch count on McKenzie, let me know. But I'm expecting like 70, 75. So if somebody saw like 85, that would add a little bit of credence to the idea of him getting there on value. But I don't love it. This Kyle Freeland projection that you guys are seeing, that 28 on FanDuel, that's another one that's bolstered by the idea of innings pitched. He's an innings eater. That's an innings pitched kind of a number and just compiling it. And I expect that the Royals, they're showing a good amount of power, good amount of projection. They've got a healthy implied total here, good hitting conditions. I expect they're going to chase him earlier than that. So I don't really buy my pitching projection on Freeland here. If you wanted to go to a value-based guy and just eat some innings, find you a handful of DK points with the idea that there's a lot of strikeouts in this Royals lineup for a low-end strikeout pitcher, if he gives you 6 or 7, could he get to enough to pay off the $6,000 price on DK? Sure. I think he could. 89 on FanDuel. I don't think you need any part of Kyle Freeland here. Steve Leibowitz is saying since he only threw 10 and a third in rehab, I can't see McKenzie. He wasn't blowing anyone away. Yeah, it's the idea that the rain capped the innings in that last one. I still think they were probably only giving him to go like 65 in that one, which would push him to like 70, 75 in my mind. In this one, I don't love it for McKenzie. Chuck Deuce is saying Milwaukee running out a AAA team, maybe double. Yeah, AAA team, but what a AAA team. You heard my enthusiasm for some of those guys at Price. Yeah, that could certainly go pop, but I think that is actually a bump given the value-based upside there and the hitting conditions in that park. So could definitely go pop, but I want to be a part of it if it does. Let's see, the Royals side of things. I would roster Royals bats, even with a lefty on the mound. You get MJ Melendez in the confirmed lineup, lefty, Vinny Pasquantino, Nick Pratto, all those guys lefty. I'll take Pratto lefty. I'll take Vinny lefty. MJ suffers a little bit if I'm remembering correctly, but I think we get some right-handed pitching out of the bullpen, get him some opportunities later in the game. So he would be a part of my plans, 1 through 5 at least in the Royals lineup. Michael Massey's somewhat interesting for a cheap price at the 7th spot. Weak back end, Garcia, Massey, Furman, and Jackie Bradley. Not the greatest back end, not the greatest opportunity to turn the lineup over, but I do think there's power and I do think there's potential at least 1 through 5. I expect they'll be popular with their run total with the hitting conditions, but I think that I'm going to go there anyway for that Nick Pratto, Bobby Witt, Pasquantino, Sal Perez, MJ Melendez part of the lineup. There's some positional, interesting ways to combine them positionally. They all come fairly cheap. There's the idea of power from each of those guys. Bobby Witt's got 18 stolen bases. Most of those guys are above average. Well, 3 out of the 5 above average for run creation. And I really believe in Bobby Witt, and I really believe in MJ's contact profile. So 1 through 5 for me on the Royal side. If you want to roster Rockies against Brady Singer, I wouldn't begrudge you shares. It's not a great lineup. They're not good against righties. He's been awful this season. 7.12 ERA, a 4.71 xFIP. That's a bad xFIP. It's certainly a lot better than his ERA, but he was good just last year. I was expecting much bigger things from Brady Singer this year. Last year, 3.23 ERA, 3.30 xFIP, a 5.6% walk rate, 24.2% strikeouts. Everything in terms of the strikeouts has kind of died on the vine. The quality's not been there. But if I'm talking about a pitcher that I believed in, a month and change ago coming into this season, like what better get right spot than facing this lousy Rockies team could you want for a kid? 5,400, 6,900. I think there's enough on the bone for a value-based upside play there against this Rockies lineup. I would probably hedge it with a few shares of Rockies bats on the other side. There are hitters that I'm interested in here. Brenton Doyle in the leadoff role is kind of compelling. I like his power upside. Ryan McMahon, Mike Moustakas from the left side of the plate. If you wanted to get creative with Moustakas, he hasn't been good this year. 232, 320, 366. Hasn't been good in recent seasons. But from the left side of the plate, maybe there's a little bit of pop. 41% hard hits in his 97 plate appearances. Nolan Jones, I am interested in. First base and outfield on DK. Third base on FanDuel, 3,200, 2,900. Good young power hitter there. Harold Castro, cheap from the left side of the plate, multi-positional tool. Elueris Montero, another prospect in this lineup now. He's on the right side of the plate. Third base, 2,500, 2,300. Cheap power bat from late in the lineup there with Montero. Hasn't really gotten it engaged at the major league level, but I think you can go there if you're stacking Rockies. So I'm kind of focused on those guys. Tovar, Austin Wynns, you can mix and match them if you're building a ton of Rockies stacks. Tovar a little bit better, as somebody pointed out in the chat the other day over like the last 2 weeks. But I don't love the Rockies side here. So minor shares of value-based pitching. I think it's viable on both sides. I prefer the Singer side to the Freeland side. Freeland needs innings pitched. Singer, I think, has a little bit more potential for strikeouts, a little bit more potential for a good game at cheap prices. I don't love either side of it. The Royals bats are my favorite part of this 4 corners. Last 3 games. Let's see if we can fly through these and leave everybody roughly an hour to build lineups, myself included. Angels going up against JP France. I'm seeing major opportunity for power on both sides of this one. JP France, I think you could maybe get away with some shares of for some value-based pitching with the idea of some strikeout upside. He hasn't been bad. A 4.07 xFIP, a 4 ERA, 22.2% strikeouts. Decent walk rate. He's given up too many home runs. Some of that came in just one of his starts, though. He had a 3 home run start that was really, really ugly. So otherwise, he's been more effective than this. So I think you can throw him against an Angels lineup that has a 22% strikeout rate up and down and more aggressive strikeouts from some of their best hitters. We're getting the version of the lineup with no Mickey Moniak, Taylor Ward back in the lineup again. He's had a decent week, playing pretty much every day this past week after I put him on my bench on the Dynasty League, which pissed me off. And he had a couple homers this week, had a productive couple of days at the plate. Hunter Renfroe, I'm skipping the Trout and Ohtani part. I think you guys know to play them basically against anybody if you're going to Angel stacks. Brandon Drury is one of the more interesting value plays in DFS right now. 10 home runs at 244 ISO from him, 12% barrels, 43.7% hard hits, multi-position at first and second on both sites for 4,100, 3,000. I think that's a value play. Thais, viable catcher for 2,500. Renfroe, definitely a major power hitter. Cooled off a little bit, 11 home runs, 202 ISO overall, but cooled over the last couple of weeks. He'll come roaring back to life, and now he's cheap, 3,800, 2,800. You can definitely grab shares of Hunter Renfroe. You get Urshela, Renifo, and Neto in the lineup. Kind of a weak back end. I like Renifo as best out of that group. He's got a little bit more power potential than Neto does. Neto's probably got the better overall hit tool. I think you can go to any one of those guys. Multi-position eligible, very, very cheap if you're stacking Angels. So I see some power potential for the Angels. You can see the numbers in the home run model. 4 guys over the magic number in the home run model. 2 of those are Ohtani and Trout, though, who are always pushing that. And Renfroe's basically always over that as well. So it's kind of an expected output opportunity for the Angels, but I think you can definitely go to it. But I think you can take shares of France value more on DK. 8700 is probably pushing it on the FanDuel slate. Griff Canning, I want no part of on the mound. 21.7% strikeout rate, 4.89 ERA, 4.27 xFIP. I think he plays directly into the Astros' power potential. No Altuve again. He's dealing with an oblique injury now. Mauricio Dubon has been somewhat effective, 97 WRC plus atop the lineup, filling in for Altuve. You get him at cheap prices. You can connect him in with Pena, Alvarez, Alex Bregman. Nice game last night, up to 8 home runs, 115 WRC plus. Kyle Tucker, kind of scuffling, but I totally believe 35 home runs is still coming, or 30 home runs at least, 25 stolen bases. He's sitting at 7 with a 171 ISO, 22% better than an average creating runs. Still a very sturdy contact profile. His price has come down a little bit. Discount Kyle Tucker, you can sign me up for all day. Chas McCormick, cheap, decent contact profile in years past. 5 home runs, 4 stolen bases this year. 232 ISO, still creating runs, 17% better than average in 106 plate appearances. I think you can definitely go to the center fielder here with McCormick. Hitting 6th, I like him a little bit better than when he's hitting like 8th. Diaz, Jake Myers, Martin Maldonado, you know what you're getting from those guys. Maldonado hits you the oddball catcher home run to bend a slate. Jake Myers has been productive in the outfield, 7% better than average, 5 home runs. So decent back end, not great with the Einer Diaz part, but you get an alternate catcher play there. They're all very cheap. I would, if I'm only building one, I would cut my options at the 6th spot with Chas McCormick there and pick from those guys, though. Flew through that one. So that's a JP France. Bats on both sides. JP France in limited doses, preferred on the DK slate. Bats in small doses. Kopech looks good too against that lineup. Yes, he does, Larry C. Yes, he does, and that is concerning. He's been a roller coaster this year. 4.52 ERA, 4.70 xFIP, a nice 26.7% strikeout rate, healthy 11.8% swinging strikes. The CSW is where you want it. The power profile, the premium contact, not at all where you want it. 16.1% barrels, 43.9% hard hits, 90.4 miles an hour average exit velo, 5.34% home run rate. It has not been pretty in a lot of these starts for Kopech, but what you like about him, I'm looking at, again, at my article, because this is what I wrote. In his most recent outing, a 4 1/3 inning start against the Angels, he allowed 4 earned runs, 2 home runs, but he struck out 10. The frustrating flamethrower had 9 strikeouts in a scoreless 2-hit 7-inning game against the Guardians prior to that, and we know how difficult it is to strike out Guardians. And then the start before that, he went 8 innings, blanked the Royals, so 2 shutouts in a row there, over 7 innings and over 8 innings, and struck out 10 in that one, allowed just 1 hit in that one, 2 hits against the Guardians. So you can get that kind of potential, and he's going up against a similarly low-end team in the Tigers here. So 8,500, 9,800, I think you can play him on both sides. Obviously, I like him better at the DK price. I think he'll be more popular at that number, so maybe a lack of ownership on the FanDuel slate pushes him up in my esteem overall, but it is definitely an interesting spot for Kopech. You can roster some Tigers on the other side with the idea of, if you get them on a bad day, if you get the Mr. Hyde version of Kopech, it could certainly go pear-shaped really, really quickly here. But they're a bad lineup. They lost their best hitter on the left side of the plate in Riley Green. If I'm going there, I'm going to some of the lefties. It's Zach McKinstry. It's Akil Baddoo. Maybe some Nick Maton. But it's not great. This is the projected version of the lineup. I don't know if we probably have the confirm. Let's see. McKinstry, Baez, Baddoo, Torkelson, Tyler Nevin. Maybe interesting, hitting 5th. He's a right-handed hitter, but if you're going to righties, it's obviously going to be Baez, Torkelson, and Nevin, but those guys are not great options. Nick Maton, Andy Ibanez, Jake Rogers, Jake Marisnik to round it out. So a lot of righties in the lineup here for Kopech. I think he can feast on this lineup. Certainly plenty of strikeouts, not a lot of upside there. So very, very limited interest, only as a hedge option if I'm getting carried away with Kopech stacks. And then I want to throw White Sox bats up the other way against Matt Boyd here. Struggling Timmy Anderson can be in my lineup any day at 4,500, 3,000. I totally believe power, speed, totally believe in Tim Anderson and the hit tool. He'll come around. Jake Berger, the 11 home runs are an outlier. The 328 ISO outlier from a productive month, similar to like Brent Rooker. But, hitting second at a cheap price, I think he's at least viable if you're going to White Sox stacks. Luis Robert, my home run pick for the day. Eloy Jimenez, tons and tons of power on the right side of the plate. Andrew Vaughn, Yasmani Grandal. So we don't get Jean Moncada, which is a little bit of a ding. But I think Andrew Vaughn, Yasmani Grandal, even Clint Frazier at 2,100, 2,200, I think is interesting. I still don't know why his stats aren't coming up in the pool from Fangraphs. He's had plate appearances in the show this year, and I know that he's in there. I checked the other day. He's not in there, so I don't know what's going on there. I got to figure that out or find his stats and add them in here somehow. But Clint Frazier, former high-end prospect, definitely a interesting enough bat at 2,100. My least favorite player in the league, Elvis Andrus, don't put him in your lineups. He's just occupying air in Chicago right now. A 48 WRC plus in 153 plate appearances. Yeah, we saw the frisky version of him last year. He was 17 home runs, 18 stolen bases in 577 plate appearances. That 105 WRC plus, as I've mentioned on a number of shows, but not yet on this channel, 105 WRC plus, he's a guy who's been around since I think like 2010 or something like that. That was the third time in his career he was above average for a full season creating runs. Every other year in a career that people think of as a good one, he was below average for run creation. Elvis Andrus, not a good player. Decent defender, but not a good offensive player. We need time. So let's move on to the last game on deck. Nate Eovaldi, another major opportunity on the mound. Equally expensive to the other aces that we've talked about, but pitching like that. Pitching very comparably to like what Sandy Alcantara did last year with that mid-20s strikeout rate, but throwing a ton of innings every time out. 74 and a third innings, 11 starts. Would have to guess that leads the league in innings pitched in 11 starts. If I'm wrong about that, forgive me, but I'm sure he's close to that. 2.42 ERA, 3.34 xFIP, a 1.0 WHIP, 12% swinging strike rate. He's just been dominant this year. Giving up a little more hard hit than you'd like to see, but a 3.7 degree average launch angle, 4.5% barrels. That doesn't turn into home runs, so I don't really worry about it. That's similar to like not Fromber, but like a Logan Webb, one of those other guys in terms of being able to keep the ball down with potentially a little bit more strikeout ability, a little bit of ability to pitch deep into the game. Plenty of strikeouts in the Mariners projected lineup. I assume the confirmed one is out, but we don't have time to grab it. So I'll look at it, though, as I'm talking through it. Kelnick leadoff. That's interesting. Leadoff Kelnick, Julio, Ty France hitting third, Cal Raleigh cleanup, Eugenio Suarez, Teoscar Hernandez. So that 1 through 6 is interesting. If you're rostering hitters against Eovaldi, and I expect they'll be low owned for the opportunity, those are 6 interesting bats in that order. I like that batting order for this team, but I don't like the idea of throwing bats at Eovaldi, just with his ability to strike hitters out, with his ability to limit power, limit run creation. I think it's a dangerous spot to roster a bunch of hitters. Maybe you grab a few shares of Mariners, but it's not great. Moderate power. These will go up a little bit with these guys hitting higher in the batting order. So those might crack like the 9 and change mark. Cal Raleigh probably the same thing with his move up the batting order. So maybe a little bit of home run potential, but Eovaldi's good enough at limiting it and good enough at limiting run creation that I think we're going much more to Eovaldi shares than we are to Mariners shares. Bryce Miller on the other side. Terrific young pitcher. I wrote about it in the article today. I left him in my lineup for a 2-start week in the Dynasty League, which was probably a mistake. But he was pitching so well that I figured, hey, if he gets through my Yankees at least, even if he has a clunker against the Rangers, that'll be probably worthwhile. He didn't get through the Yankees. He had a bad start against the Yanks the other day. His first bad start. He's sitting at 23% strikeouts, a spectacular 2.2% walk rate, 4.06 xFIP, a 3.0 ERA. But he's going up against a loaded Rangers lineup that's leading the league in runs. They're obviously showing a bunch of power on that side. So tempered expectations for Bryce here. He's 9,995. If he was in the 8s on DK, I would probably be saying grab some shares and play him. At 99, I think he's somewhat skippable. I think you can get a good upside game, but some of his strikeouts came in 2 big starts against the Athletics. So I think the real strikeout number is probably a little bit lower than what he's currently showing. I think over time he'll find more strikeouts, and I think of the world of this pitcher. But I think the actual strikeout rate when we're talking about non-athletic start is lower than that. So very tepid interest, if any, in Bryce Miller, who I love as a pitcher, but not at these prices in this matchup. If you're going there, I'm not telling you you're making a mistake. Don't let me talk you out of it because he is spectacular. But I do want to roster some Rangers against him. We're seeing obvious big home run marks on Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, Adolis Garcia, Josh Young, Nathaniel Lowe in the middle of that lineup, 4,600, 3,000. Nice little dip in price to help you roster those other hitters. Very productive guy at the plate, 121 WRC plus in 258 plate appearances. Only 6 homers, hit a little bit more power, hit a little bit more in the hit tool last year. But I really like Nathaniel Lowe. Jonah Heim. This has the Robbie Grossman, Travis Jankowski, Leody Taveras version of the lineup. The actual lineup has Mitch Garver in it, which is great. No Ezekiel Duran, so we get Grossman and Jankowski on the bottom of the lineup. But Jonah Heim and Mitch Garver both in the lineup. 2 great catcher plays. It sucks you can't play them both together outside of FanDuel. On DK, you don't get them both together, but as an either-or power-hitting catcher combination on DK, that's pretty great. So I like that spot quite a bit. But Bryce is very good. So overall, he could potentially cap the Rangers' run creation upside here. So it could be like one of those 4, 5, 6 run type of games for the Rangers. Maybe one of these guys goes off, hits you a big home run, and gives you a nice score for DFS. But it might not be the one where we've got 8, 9 different guys to choose from in a monster performance, kind of like what they put up with, 16 runs last night. So maybe we don't get that type of output. But I think there is at least power potential, maybe some good one-offs, some good short stacks here. That said, gang, 1235 on the nose. How about that? Wasn't even looking, wasn't even trying. Well, I was trying to do that, but wasn't looking. Let's take a quick look at the pitching board. I think this is sort of right. Some of this might change slightly as I update run totals, but this is probably pretty accurate. All 4 of these guys I think are very much in play. Senga's my least favorite out of the group. But Alcantara, Joe Ryan, Eovaldi, if you wanted to cut your pitching staff to that today, on FanDuel, obviously, it's difficult to just do only those guys on DK, I know. But if you wanted to cut your FanDuel pitching staff to just those guys, I wouldn't tell you you're making a mistake. They're all spectacular. Kodai Senga, I think, is very valuable here. Cheaper pricing than Ryan and Eovaldi. Ranger Suarez, we talked about, I think is viable as a innings-based and potential to pitch cleanly, limit power against that lousy Nats lineup. This one I could easily see going pear-shaped, though. So don't get your hopes up with Ranger Suarez, but I think he's viable at that DK price. He's a good SP2 to use in combination with these guys. Kopech, definitely viable upside from the mid-range, particularly on DK, 8,500. Very good price there. I would probably roster Kopech ahead of Bryce Miller. Kyle Freeland, another DK value play. We're looking for clean innings. That's all we're going to get from Kyle Freeland here. I don't love that spot. Taj Bradley, I wouldn't begrudge you stacks, but you can see, down the board, do I want to spend the same for Taj Bradley or more than I'm spending on FanDuel for these guys? I don't know if I do going up against that Red Sox lineup here. Good pitching conditions, decent, very, very good young pitcher, but not the greatest spot in the world. Blackburn, Boyd, McKenzie, Kikuchi, Singer value, maybe you grab from a low projection, but the idea of going up against a bad lineup with a kid who was much, much better last year, that would probably be my last guy in as a value play. Don't really need much of these other guys. Fellas, hit that like, hit that subscribe, help me out a little bit there. I'm going to jump out of here, start building some lineups. Good luck out there today. Hope that you guys have a great day out there. I hope that if I don't win the tournament, it's one of you guys. If you do happen to win the tournament, go copy paste the Roto Scouts logo into your thing. You don't need a free month of Stochastic. Come on. You got Stochastic. Give us a little love over at Roto Scouts. Feel free to do that, by the way, guys, if you want to join the team in like an unofficial sense. I'm not currently giving away prizes, but I had the idea of at some point, maybe I'll throw like a little thing out there. Like I'll throw you a couple $100 if you win a tournament with my logo or whatever. So if you guys wanted to start doing that, let's get a couple logos up at the top of these tournaments. Or at the very least, if you hit something, shout it out on Twitter or something and give us a little love. But hit the like button. I'm getting out of here. Good luck today, gang. See ya.